You're listening to Neurodivergent Mates. Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent Mates. I'm your host, Will Wheeler, and today I'm joined with my good friend, Dr. Natasha Arthars, to talk about Rethink ADHD support in tertiary education. Natasha, how's it going, my friend?
Pretty good, Will. How about yourself?
Oh, can't complain. It's Tuesday, one step closer to the weekend, all of that. I hear you've got a pretty big weekend planned this weekend.
I do. Yes, I'll be celebrating my 40th birthday this weekend.
Yeah, all right. Nice. And going for a little bit of Italian?
Yep, and plenty of cake.
Plenty of cake. What's your favorite type of cake?
There's lots of cake that I like, but I've put in a very particular request for the cake that I want, and it's an orange almond cake.
Orange almond. Do they taste like what are those like red chocolate balls type of thing?
Oh no, it's not like that. But it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's really like citrusy. It kind of feels healthy, even though it's full of sugar, and it's not. It's just delicious.
Yeah, nice. So, for all the listeners, I had my birthday on the weekend as well. I had I didn't have a cake like yours.
Did you have any cake?
Yeah, chocolate Bavarian cake
sounds delicious.
Yeah, from the freezer section in Woolworths. I don't know. When you get past 40, you're just sort of like, well, really, when you get past I suppose 25, you don't really seem to worry too much about the cakes and all of that. But I'm sure you do worry about that cake coming up to your birthday and all of that. But look, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on. We're always talking about, lots of different things around neurodiversity, especially in tertiary education, all of that. So I think it'll just be really cool to sit down, have a chat, all of those things. But before we get stuck into that, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping just for any new listeners that we might have. Now, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. You can check us out on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Also, too, if you haven't already done so, please go to wherever you listen to your podcast, find the show, subscribe, like, comment, whatever you do to help with the algorithm and really help to get us out there as well. Now, big shout out to all the work that we're doing at Neurodiversity Academy. Please go and check out what we're doing at neurodiversityacademy.com. And just a little bit of a heads up, warning, some discussions may be triggering. If you need help, please reach out to a loved one or call emergency services. We are not doctors. Well, one of us actually is.
Not that kind of doctor, though.
Yeah. I know. But this is a space for sharing experiences and strategies. And look, to tell you the truth, this might not be as hard-hitting as some of, say, the mental health ones we've spoken about, but I think it's still good to just open that up to the floor and all of that. Now, look, if you've got some questions you'd like to ask us during the live podcast, look, chuck them into the comment section in wherever you're watching the podcast from. Okay, and if we think it's something cool that we'll want to share, we'll put it up on the screen, and either myself or Dr. Arthars. What do you prefer to be called, Dr. Arthars or just Natasha?
Please just call me Natasha.
All right, cool. So we'll just go with Natasha there. Okay, so look, Natasha, you all ready to rock and roll?
Yep, sounds good.
You're born ready, right? I'll take that as a yes. All right, cool. So let's start off. So look, please share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know where to start with this, but I guess because we're talking about education, that's probably the right place to begin. I got into working in education back in, I think it was around 2008, when I moved to China. and started teaching English, then got into teaching vocational education and training, and really, really love teaching and supporting students. So I continued on with that when I came back to Australia. And then I should say when it comes to my own education, I have quite a long list of qualifications, a lot of vocational education qualifications, and a lot of university qualifications too. But what most people don't know is I had 2 failed attempts at university before I was actually successful. So I, on my 3rd attempt, was very successful with university, really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it, and got a bit of the study bug, I guess you could say, and went from one course to the next course, into research, doing a PhD, which I completed, I think it was back in 2021. And that threw me into a research career, which I have now, because I really found that passion for not just education, but for research, and researching education obviously brings those 2 things together, and I find it really enjoyable. So that's a bit about me in terms of my work. My research focuses on adult learners in particular. I'm very interested in how we can support and engage students, and also how we can use technology. And Will and I think, talk a lot about technology, in particular AI and things like that. So it's something I'm really passionate about.
And look, and what I do want to say, so before we actually jumped on this, Natasha has just gotten the new Meta glasses. Okay. That's the case, but so share some stuff about it, because I thought it was like really cool. What's some of the cool things with it, out of curiosity? Going for the Buddy Holly look.
I literally just picked them up today. What I thought was really cool about them is I can put them on, because I wear, you can't see it. I often wear AirPods to cancel out a lot of background noise, and it gets a bit annoying after a while, but I can put these on and I can actually listen to music through them, and people generally can't hear what I'm listening to.
But do you still pick up the background noise because you don't have anything in your ears?
Yes and no. What actually happens, I didn't know this until I put them on, and I was playing around with them today. If the background noise ramps up, so if I don't know, so something else happens in the background, maybe the vacuum is going in another room, or the dogs are barking out the back, or whatever it is, the sound in the Meta Ray-Bans actually turns up.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
so it's like that like self-sufficient, like I don't know what the word on this.
Adaptive, I guess.
Yeah, adapts to the environment. I wonder what would happen if you went into a rock concert.
Yeah, I don't think they would be very useful in that setting. The volume only goes up so far.
What's going on? All of that type of stuff. No, but awesome stuff with that there. But look, I think just quickly going back to a little bit about your background, all of that. Out of curiosity, what was, and if you don't mind, it'd be cool to sort of go back to your younger years type of thing, and, especially being undiagnosed, all of that. What was growing up like for you, like especially in school, especially going from, say, school, now we're going into, a very high level of education as a doctor. What was that like for yourself? And do you look at yourself now and think back to then and go, man, I would never have thought I'd be where I am now?
I definitely didn't imagine that I would be where I am now. In high school, when it came to conversations around potential careers, there was a lot of talk about, doctor, lawyer, accountant, like those typical careers that you hear about and that people aspire to. I didn't know that doing research was a thing. I didn't even think about the idea of working at a university and teaching there. It just wasn't something that I considered. And I was someone that got really bored with the idea of different careers. I jumped from job to job to job. So looking back at it now, I can see the patterns. it makes a lot of sense. And I guess my report cards from high school are pretty classic. You see in primary school, I did very well. In high school, I also did very well until a certain point, partway through high school, probably through, that developmental stage, also changes in hormones and all of those sort of things that are going on. Suddenly I became the person that was, that could do really well if only I applied myself more. I didn't, I was doing things at the last minute. I didn't want to put lots of time and effort into work. The things that involved more planning and investment of time, like I struggled with those. So things changed for me partway through high school, and I had a lot of conflict with teachers and all those kind of things that happen.
Out of curiosity, because I wouldn't take you as a person who would be having a lot of conflict with people, but what was that about? Was it because you were not applying yourself? Because I had a lot of conflict with teachers, and that was because I was like the class clown and caused a lot of shit in the classroom, if that makes sense. But I couldn't imagine you being that.
No, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't call myself the class clown, but I got bored very quickly. And I think I had a lot of energy, like probably anxious energy, like internally, and having to sit and just, for example, maths class was a good one. I got kicked out of my maths class almost every single lesson. And I could not stand to be in that class. It was just really, it wasn't that it was challenging for me. I think I found it really easy, and I did things quickly. I got bored really quickly, and then I distracted everyone around me, and would get thrown out.
In what way, out of curiosity?
Like throwing things, you roll up.
Oh, would you really? Oh
yeah,
my God,
yeah,
that's hilarious.
those kind of things.
I just would have picked that with you.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously many, many years ago, back when we didn't have mobile phones.
You probably still do it now, right?
I guess I have other ways to keep myself occupied. Like I can pick up my phone and start scrolling on Facebook. We didn't have that when we were in school. True. It was the traditional, pen and paper. So there wasn't much to do if you weren't feeling very engaged, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
The other thing that's probably worth mentioning, and I think it's a trait of people with ADHD, possibly also people with autism, is this strong sense of justice. And so when I saw things that I didn't agree with, or teachers were doing things that I didn't think were right, they didn't really care about students, then, that was a bit of a trigger for me, and I felt the need to do something about it, which, wasn't particularly productive.
Didn't go down too well there. No. Interesting. And by the way, everyone, just for those of you who don't know, Natasha is actually one of our advisory members on Neurodiversity Academy. So she really helps us with a lot of the academic stuff, all of those types of things. So it's been a great honor, maybe, if that's the word, to have her on board helping us with a whole bunch of stuff there. But look, I think this really blends in well to this next question here. So how does brain development in young people with ADHD, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, affect executive functioning? So could you maybe just explain executive functioning first for maybe people who don't know what that is, and then maybe we could answer that?
Yeah. Let me think about the best way to talk through this, because there's a lot going on in this question, of course. So if you think about executive functioning as aspects like planning, your working memory, your impulse control, and we also talk about like cognitive flexibility, so flexibility in your thinking. Those are aspects of executive functioning. And when we think about people with ADHD, planning is a big challenge, right? And also estimating time. We have time blindness, we have trouble estimating how long something will take, and all of that feeds into issues that we have with being able to plan, right? So working memory is another thing that I mentioned. So when it comes to our memory, we've got the long-term memory, the things that are stored, they're backed up, that they stay there. But your working memory is, if you think about it like your computer, it only has so much working memory before you start to see that sort of spinning wheel where it's not able to do anything and it freezes, right? So it's a bit like that with us as people when it comes to our prefrontal cortex and executive functioning. So we've only got a certain amount of working memory that we can use before we start to sort of freeze and it's like overload. And then if you think about impulse control, teenagers are a perfect example. They don't have much impulse control. They do what they want to do. They don't think about necessarily the consequences of it. They're very impulsive. So that's something for us that can be a challenge with ADHD as well. And then that cognitive flexibility in our thinking, are we rigid in our thinking or not? Things like memory, impulse control, cognitive flexibility, planning, those time aspects. And there's other things as well when it comes to executive functioning. So there's different parts of the brain that do different things, right? And if we think about the prefrontal cortex in the front of our brain, that area is responsible for a lot of this executive functioning. So that's where it's happening. And what is important to know is that our brains develop and change, and that happens at different points in our lives. A lot of it happens, in our childhood, in our adolescence, and then as a young adult. So typically, the prefrontal cortex is fully matured, or it's pretty much gotten to where it's going to get to by the time we're in, for most people, when we reach that sort of young adulthood stage in our 20s. But something that is like a hallmark of ADHD is that area of the brain develops, like there's a bit of a lag in the development. And it used to be, there was something floating around, I think, somewhere on the internet, it caught on and people used to talk about it, this idea that, an ADHD person, their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're about 35. I don't know why that number caught on. When I did a bit of research in preparation for this episode, I wasn't able to find anything to back that up. But what we do see is that there's a delay of between 2 and 5 years. So while a typical adult may have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, they're able to plan, they're able to control their impulses mostly, and go about their day and all of that sort of thing. By the time they're sort of in their early 20s, it can be a case of, for those with ADHD, that's a 5-year delay, and they may not reach full maturity until, say, they're 25 or later. And so this is a big challenge, right? And especially when it comes to education, because you've got students that are in university that have a mostly developed prefrontal cortex. They're able to plan, they're able to make good choices about doing their study, finishing their assignments rather than going out partying mostly. But for those with ADHD, those struggles continue for longer.
And you'll probably find that, especially if we're looking at tertiary education, we're studying all of that. There's so many distractions Okay.
Yes.
And like you were just saying, like, especially like the uni lifestyle, that's very big drinking culture, very party culture. I can see a lot of, neurodivergent people getting caught up with the party culture and then going and trying to rush to get their stuff done, where a lot of other people be like, I need to get this done, then I'll go party, if that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. So those with ADHD may be chasing dopamine, and you're not going to get it spending hours and hours doing an assignment, especially if it's not something that you're particularly interested in. Whereas, the local pub may be a much greater source of dopamine for that student. And also, like I think we've discussed this, neurodivergent individuals can be at higher risk for issues related to alcohol, to drugs, and other things. And so all of that starts to come into play when they're moving into university studies, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I honestly think back, if I was to, like, because when did you first start like really studying and doing stuff? What age were you again?
So after university, not university, after high school,
School. Yeah.
I took a 1-year break and I went into a traineeship. So I went into work, and I stayed in full-time work and tried to do part-time university studies. So it was, about 1 year after finishing high school that I started university for the first time.
How did you find that, out of curiosity? Because, like, I think having that gap year can sometimes be quite good for neurodivergent people. Because
Yeah.
you've got to remember, you've just come out of, when I was in school, it was 12 years of, I think it's 13 now. You've just come out of 13 years of like being in school, and then you're going back into this huge like thing. I would have assumed like at least just having a break can almost help reset the brain.
And it's not just that, Will. Like, if you think about it, at school, you're not having to make a lot of choices. Yes, you may make some choices about what your senior subjects look like, but if you're going down the university pathway, at the end of school or even before then, you need to make a decision about what it is that you want to study. And that involves making a decision about what it is that you want to do with your life. And that's a really big ask of young people in general. And I think it's an even bigger ask of someone who is neurodivergent. So for me, I had gone into the workplace. So I had gone from high school, which was very structured, to the workplace, which again was very structured. And then when I went into university, that structure crumbled because it wasn't like a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 thing, right? I had this inconsistent schedule. Some days I would have some things on, other days I wouldn't. I became much more responsible for planning how I went about my study, when I did it, when I worked on assignments. And so that, I think, was a key challenge, that like flexibility can be such a great thing, but it's a blessing, but it can also be a curse.
What was some of the things that distracted you, out of curiosity, at that age when you were going into university and studying?
That's a good question. It's maybe not that it distracted me, but I was working full time and I had a lot of trouble prioritizing my university and my work. And so even trying to fit, like, the idea that I could fit all of that in was probably a bit too much, especially at that young age.
How many hours a week were you doing of study, out of curiosity?
So I think I was doing 2 subjects each semester. So if you think about a full-time study load might be, 35 hours a week. So that's, 17 and a half hours on top of a full-time job, which was, almost 40 hours. It was a lot as a young person. And also that move to university, there's suddenly all these different rules, right? In high school, you didn't really have to think about things like referencing. You weren't having to go to the library and find academic sources. The textbooks that you used in high school were much smaller versus what you get lumped with in university. And I found it really challenging. There was a lot of, I guess, unwritten rules as well about what you needed to do, when you needed to do it, how you needed to do it. And so, yeah, all of those things I think were a real challenge for me.
Interesting. I think like I could see myself now, if I had gone straight in after school, I would have got so distracted by the lifestyle, I think. I love like meeting people, and I think like university is big on that. It's almost like a new school type of thing, things like that. But sorry, one thing I was going to say, right, and it was interesting how you spoke about the hours that you had to do on top of work, right? Now, I think this is a big thing where when I've spoken to other tertiary providers going, oh, look, say the sales people, right? They'll go, look, it's only 20 hours a week you have to do. Now, for a neurodivergent person, you're hearing like, oh, only 20 hours. Oh, yeah, well, that's not too bad, But really, if you think about 20 hours in a week, right, that's half a week of work.
Yeah, it's over 7 days. It's almost 3 hours a day, and 20 hours may not sound like a lot. And some salespeople do try and paint this rosy picture of what study would look like, and they may even say, "Oh, but with your workplace experience or your past experience here, it would probably be easier. It may not even take you that long." But if you were to say to someone, do you have 3 hours every single day, 7 days a week, every semester for however many years, that conversation would look really different.
And I think this is something that I would almost like to say, look, this is what, because it's hard to sort of say what 20 hours would look like on top of everything else you're doing, where can, all of that type of stuff there. But look, let's move on from that, because we're sort of talking about the challenges and all of that. But what are some of the key challenges students with ADHD face when transitioning into tertiary education like TAFE or university? And we sort of touched a little bit on that. Yeah. Did you want to build off from that?
Yeah, I would say there's this shift, like I said, from high school that can be very structured to much less structure. So different tutorials, different lectures, or different classes on different days, and different, each day looks different. And so there's this shift to what we call self-directed learning, where instead of it being the teacher's responsibility, the teacher's reminding students that they've got to do this, they've got to do that, and, they're taking the lead more. When it comes to tertiary education like vet and higher ed, there's this real focus on self-directed learning, that the responsibility increasingly sits with the student. And I think that is important, but it shouldn't be a quick overnight change of leaving high school and having that structure to starting university or vet, and suddenly you take full responsibility. And that's because if we think about self-directed learning, that demands things like organization. It demands establishing routines, independent management of your time. And those are those areas where executive functioning, like we talked about, is a challenge, because those with ADHD, they may still be trying to develop those areas. And even myself to this day, I'm still trying to learn how to cope with some of those things, changes in routine or managing my time. So this quick shift to self-directed learning creates a massive problem for those with ADHD that may not be equipped to deal with it. And so what we see, some of those common difficulties that students would have is initiating tasks. So you get your assignment, like just getting started on the assignment is a problem. They don't want to, they can't bring themselves to start it. Tracking their deadlines of what they've got due and when they've got it due. This overload of their working memory because they're responsible, they've got to keep on top of all of it. And just adjusting to that reduced external structure that you would see in high school. And so those kind of challenges lead to what we see, like what we would think of as procrastination, students missing assignment deadlines, becoming more stressed. And like we particularly see that when students don't have the same executive capacity, like they don't have the same executive functioning ability as other students. So it hasn't quite caught up with the demands of their study. And so I think,
Well, sorry, you finish.
Before we jumped on this live stream, you sent me a link to a really interesting paper.
Did you get a chance to read that, did you?
Of course I did. I did. You sent me,
that was only like a minute before I jumped on. I haven't even read that yet.
Sending me a paper is like sending me clickbait. It's like I have to have a look.
What was it about, actually? Because it looks really cool.
Yeah,
and I thought I would ask you because you'll tell me. Then I won't have to read it.
I'd love to talk about it because it actually ties into a lot of the points that I wanted to make and a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, when I was in preparation for this, I was doing research, trying to find relevant papers and things to support some of the things I wanted to talk about. And there is this lack of research, which makes it really challenging. But this paper that you shared with me, it's by Catherine Gibbs and colleagues. It's an Australian paper, was published in April this year. And it's exploring the perspectives of Australian neurodivergent university students. So it's an Australian focused. And like they said, there's not much in particular in Australia that looks at the student perspectives, like how students are experiencing these things. So we can talk about what our experiences are, but you don't see much about it in the research. And so what they did, they interviewed 33 undergraduate students that were in education or they were in health sciences, and they were looking at their university experiences. So these were neurodivergent university students. They focused on those with ADHD and autism. And interestingly, they touched on things that we've talked about before as well, Will. So we've seen there's this widening access to higher education. We've got more people going through university than we have before. And that brings with it an increase in diverse students. So more neurodivergent students, more with ADHD, more who are autistic and that sort of thing. And in Australia, neurodivergent individuals, they're less likely to complete tertiary education than neurotypical peers. So it puts us at a disadvantage, right? And they quoted some statistics from, I can't remember where it was. It's something that we've discussed before. Where is it? Yep.
Was that from the Australian Disability?
No, I have a feeling it was from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It was. So they were saying in Australia, only 8.1% of autistic people hold a bachelor's degree or higher. And that's compared with 31.2% of non-autistic people. So if you think about it, almost 1 in 3 non-autistic Australians are likely to have a university degree. That's only around 8% of the autistic population that are likely to have a university degree. So that's we're either seeing that there's less of those students going into tertiary education, and or there's less of them actually getting through. And like they said, when it comes to ADHD, they're more likely to have lower average grades, less likely to complete their studies, higher dropout rates, and they make slower progress compared to neurotypicals. Yeah, and so if I look at the findings, and this was, it was a university in Brisbane. I don't think it was QUT because I've not come across it. I'm curious about which university it was. But
I can connect you with the people who I got that from if you want.
I'll have a look later, and I might reach out to you about that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they said, so if I skip to the discussion of their findings, for example, they said the flexibility, unpredictability, and the large amount of choice at university that comes with that transition process, so going from high school to university, made it more difficult for students to manage their independent self-study. It made it more difficult for them to manage having these variable course schedules and just generally the freedom of of campus life, like you talked about. And I think they quoted one of the participants as saying that prioritization was one of the biggest boundaries for them because they wanted to socialize. They didn't want to do any university work, and they were finding it really hard to be disciplined. So there's a lot of discussion about those challenges, like we've talked about.
Does it say the age range at all in that?
Yeah, yep. There's a table of participants. There's some in the 18 to 20 range, quite a few in the 25 to 35, some 21 to 24. There's a variation.
So it sounds like it's around that like mark of what you're talking about, from like up to 25 there, or whatever type of thing.
Yeah. And what was quite interesting, there were quite a few interesting things in there, but they were talking about wanting to personally connect with the tutor that they had. And they talked about this idea, I can't remember exactly where it was, but this idea of kind of tutor shopping. And so let's say that you're in a subject that has 500 students. There's going to be one massive lecture and probably 15 different tutorials to choose from. And that means that there's lots of different tutors. And so some of them talked about finding a tutor that they connected with and going and choosing their tutorial. And so more specifically, trying to find tutors that would understand their needs and be able to help them. And that's something that we've talked about, the idea of inclusive learning design and accommodating all students, rather than just, having your way of teaching and doing it that one way.
Sorry, I'm going to say something. This is funny. This is how my entrepreneurial brain works. I'm thinking like maybe on like the Neurodiversity Academy platform, we could have like a section that could help people. So tutors can go on there and like, say what they're doing, and then people can go there and, do connect with them and all that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, it could be really interesting. So I think that connection and understanding is important for students. That was one of the interesting things that was in that paper. There's lots of interesting things. Another is related to accommodations, and I think you might have had a specific question.
I'm glad I sent that to you now. I'm glad I sent that to you.
It just touched on so many of the things we were talking about already.
Yeah, crazy.
I'm wondering, I actually think, did we have a question about accommodations and supports? Because maybe
Actually, the next one is, hang on, I'll put the next one up.
perfect.
So what support, see, this is just flowing well. What supports and accommodations are typically made available to students with ADHD in tertiary settings?
Yep. So generally what we see, the main accommodation that people receive is extra time. So if an assignment is due today, they may have an additional couple of weeks or an additional week to complete it. And then if there's an exam, it may be additional time in the exam, right? And the third one that we commonly see is some accommodations in relation to the exam setting, but that's less common. And it's generally more about just giving extra time. And of course, that's what they talked about in this paper too. And, saying that accommodations included but weren't limited to extra time to complete assessment tasks of up to 2 weeks, and exams, so extra time with exams and having a quiet environment to complete exams and potentially some rest breaks. And interestingly, some of the students talked about not using those accommodations because they were unhelpful.
Interesting. Unhelpful because I just didn't do anything. Is that what they mean, like type of thing?
Well, I'll read it directly from the paper. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Harry said that the problem with an extension is because it's very easy for me to now treat the extra week as the new due date, which is definitely
I'm now going to put it back.
Which is definitely starting to cause more issues. If I know I've got an extension, it really doesn't help as much as you'd think. So yes, and that's something that I've experienced. If I have a deadline, I will get it done by the deadline. But if you tell me I can have another week to do it, of course, in my brain, that deadline's just changed. So it was really interesting to see a student specifically talking about this.
Because I would say, right, like, and this is just me thinking off the top of my head, the accommodations that I would want is more in the classroom. An organization knowing, hey, let's get a schedule in place to help Will. Let's have check-ins with him regularly. Let's get him started on his assessment because he struggles to get that started. Let's give him a template of what this looks like so he has an idea of, to me, that's what accommodations would be for me.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is accommodations in relation to assessment, more so than accommodations in relation to learning. And I think that's interesting. So if you think about, apart from, the student that goes, all right, well, I've got a new deadline now, so I that's an extra week.
I can go and hit the piss tonight. And
exactly. or binge watch my favorite Netflix show or whatever it is.
Yeah, because I've got another week.
Yeah, the problem with that is, let's say you have a 13-week semester, right? The first assignment is due, we want to say, week 7. And if you are automatically entitled to a 2-week extension as an accommodation, that's great. But that means that you don't have it due until week 9. By that stage, the class has moved on. They're talking about other things. You get it done by week 9, get it submitted. But then the next assignment is due, like, it's a 13-week semester. You get another 2 weeks, so that's week 15. Effectively, you actually don't get an accommodation for that second assignment because you've already used up those 2 weeks, and then you get an extension of 2 weeks. And so it's this domino effect.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that snowball effect type of thing.
Yeah, and then while all the other students are enjoying their holiday, Here you are trying to still finish your assignment after, within your 2-week extension. So you don't get that same chance to have a break. And then you're back on it a few weeks later, doing the same thing the next semester.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it might be a short-term fix, but I question whether it is a long-term sustainable thing.
Yeah,
and I think we've discussed not exams before, but we've had a discussion, I think, where you're talking about classes and getting help from teachers, and their idea was to just get you to stay back after class and to help you then. And by that time, your brain is just like, no, Will, like
we're cooked.
We're not. Yeah. So that working memory is just fried. And you're exhausted. So if you think about exams, getting extra time, that's it. That's the same situation, right?
Yeah. No, totally. Because the holidays are so important. All of those things, just breaking, and I think also the mindset. If you know your friends are out there going, hey, Will, we're going to go to the pub or whatever tonight or whatever, right? Because at that age, that's when you're doing all of that stuff. It's very hard to control those types of things because it's impulse control. Do I stay there and do my study, or do I go out and meet heaps of people, hit the piss with my mates, being a guide, chatting up birds and stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Then, another thing is in university in particular, we don't see it as much in vet. We have lots of group assignments. So how do those accommodations work when you're working with a group and you've got things that you need to contribute because they don't have the same deadlines that you do? And so I did a bit of hunting to see, well, what is the research around these accommodations? Like, is there support for them? And I found when it comes to empirical studies, there was no ADHD specific performance benefit of having extra time. So if you give someone with ADHD and a neurotypical person extra time, it has the same benefit for both. And so if we're thinking about accommodations that are catered specifically to people with ADHD, if it has the same benefit for a neurotypical person, is it really is it really specific and helpful for the ADHD person? That was a bit of a question mark for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what? I was just looking at the next questions and that one we've got to go over, but they seem like we've just sort of covered them. So, for example, there's research suggesting additional time. So we've just covered that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe we go into this one
Keep
here.
going.
In terms of learning access, what are some ways educators can make lectures or classes more ADHD friendly?
Yep, definitely. So like I said, it seems like accommodations and support relate more to assessment than to learning. And so this focus on learning access, I think, is really important. And the learning happens in the classroom, it happens online, in the lectures, tutorials, different classes. And I guess making it more ADHD friendly, we've talked about lots of different ways, and I'm sure you've got things to contribute. There's two things that I really want to talk about here because they bug me. One is when it comes to online classes and having to have the camera on. I don't think that is ADHD friendly. I don't think that is neurodivergent friendly at all. So when I'm teaching online, I say to students, it's up to you whether you want your camera on or off. It doesn't bother me either way. Choose what is right for you. Because I think that it can be quite overwhelming, the idea of knowing that you're being watched. You're in this box, and most ADHD, like a lot of ADHD people, like we like to move around, but when we're here in this box, we can feel really constrained. So I would say I would advocate for allowing students to choose whether or not they want their cameras on. if they're doing breakout rooms and group work and things, that might be a different situation. But I think they should be given the freedom to choose. The other thing is about recorded classes. So I've heard educators say that they don't want to share their PowerPoints. They don't want to record the class and share it in advance or afterwards or whatever, because then students will get lazy and not come to class. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Yes, there may be students that make the choice that because it's all there, they don't need to go to the class. But I think that's up to them. Now, I think it's supportive for those with ADHD because they can choose how they want to access it, when they want to access it. So, for example, being able to watch the recorded lecture and change the speed. I think that's a big thing. If you're sitting there watching something on 1 times speed, it can be so easy to get distracted, end up online shopping while you're trying to listen to the lecture because you think you can multitask. Sometimes just turning that speed up to 1.2, 1.5 can be enough to keep people on track and paying attention. So I would say those are the two relatively easy things that people can do to support students.
Can I just say on that, right, on like the recording, all of that, for me, right, it would work really well for me because I'm able to watch what's going to be covered in the lecture, for example, right?
Yeah.
Then when I go into the lecture, I'm able to go, this is the part I really didn't really understand here. I can listen, and if I still don't get it, I can then ask questions. When I'm there just hearing it for the first time, I don't know the questions to ask them because I'm just processing so much information.
Exactly.
That's where the video recordings would work really well because it's like I'm getting that head start on taking that information in and being able to have it sink in, if that makes sense, or even go, man, I really don't understand this part. I can ask, can you explain this? I'm not understanding this part here. And then they can and then even if lectures are recorded while I'm in there asking them, then I can listen back and go, now I see what they're talking about and, things like that.
Yeah. So that's why I found the paper that you shared with me really interesting because they were interviewing students and asking about their perspectives. And what we're talking about today, like these are our perspectives. And I think if you were to share this with educators and say, hey, actually, people with ADHD are saying that if you recorded these things, they would engage more. They would not just listen to your recording, they would then go to class. Like that's more engagement and more interaction with the learning resources. I think that's a much more positive way to frame it, and it may get them to reconsider what they're doing. But I think there also needs to be support for students in terms of developing that executive functioning, helping support them to be able to plan their time, to be able to prioritize things and those aspects, which we tend to overlook when we're focused on a particular subject in a particular course.
And those types of things, this is my throwing my 2 cents in here. I believe those things need to be done right at the beginning of when they're student. Not like let's throw them into the lion pit and see what happens, right? These things should be done. And so there's, like we said, so there's structure. So it's like, okay, I know I need to go speak to, I don't know, my support person or whatever that looks like. Every Tuesday or whatever that looks like, right? Now, what I remember as well, especially when I was studying, at first it was incredibly hard. But once I started to get those processes and go, I need to do this, then it became something. And I didn't need as much support then. So they'll probably start to see when these people are getting the right support, they're feeling confident, they're feeling great. Okay, that's building that confidence. It gives more confidence to the learner. they're going to start to excel, and this is where they start to develop new skills, all of that. I know that was what happened with me. I was really crap with, I used to be really crap with, say, things like PowerPoint or Word, all of that. But then just doing it and, all of that, I was like, oh my God, I've got this now, great, fantastic, and that could be where then students go, man, I feel more confident. I want to go study some more, rather than quitting and going, well, I'm going to be underemployed because I'll never get through this because I just can't do it.
Exactly. So building confidence, I think, is really important, not just for neurodivergent students, but students in general. And the idea of self-efficacy, which is a person's belief in their ability to succeed. So those things are really important. And like you said, education has a link to the workplace, to people's futures. So it's incredibly important that we do these things and look beyond just creating support plans for those that have formal diagnoses and meet criteria. It should be a much broader perspective of how can we support all students, particularly with what we know about the challenges that neurodivergent students may face.
But you know what as well, we're talking a lot about this with students, but yes, when education plays such a huge role, especially tertiary education, right? For that next level, which is the workplace. So if we're able to help them with a lot, we're able to build that confidence, they're going to take that to the workplace. If they're in an environment where they're not confident, they're not getting things done on time, or, they're not guided, all of that, they're going to take that into the workplace. Do you know what I mean? So there is this flow-on effect when we do have, these proper strategies in place, or support, or understanding more than anything, that's going to really boost these people's, like we said, confidence to take it to that next level.
Yep. I completely agree. And I'm sure you've had conversations with people that have not been particularly successful in high school, or in vet, or in university, and it really shapes their beliefs in themselves and what they see as their identity. And that has long-lasting effects on people. So yeah, I think it's really important, like you said.
Well, I think I really excelled in the workplace, which gave me the confidence to then go and do tertiary education, right? But then I found that when I got in there, it was almost like knocking me back down again. And it's like, this is because of this. This isn't because of me. Hence why I'm trying to do what we do with Neurodiversity Academy, because I can see that was a pattern with lots of other people as well there, So lots of cool stuff. But look, we're pretty much towards the end of the session. Awesome chat, by the way. So, finally, where can people connect with you if they'd like to learn more about your work or research, all of that type of stuff? Where's the best place?
I would say Google my name, or go look for me on LinkedIn. When it comes to research, Google Scholar so academics have Google Scholar pages which list all of their articles and things like that. The most accessible way to get in touch with me, I would say, is through LinkedIn. I doubt there are lots of people that want to go trawling through various journal articles, because for most they're not as interesting to read as I would find them. But so Natasha Arthars on LinkedIn would be the best way. And if it's possible, Will, when you post this, if you could share the link to that paper that we were talking about, I think people would get a lot out of it. Yeah,
I'll try and, I can't post this now because it's already posted. But but maybe what I can do, I'll see if I can put it into the notes when I put it up onto the podcasting platforms, all of that. So they might be able to go back and click on that and download the things. But Natasha, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure when we're chatting, all of that type of stuff. But I think this is definitely an area that we're seeing a lot of development and growth into. And I think as well that a lot of these tertiary education providers are really going to have to start adapting, because this is what students need and want as well. So the organizations that don't comply with that, they're going to be missing out on a lot of potential business and things like that, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. And with the focus on having 8 or 9 out of 10 people going through tertiary education in the future, it's certainly something that we need to address.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thanks heaps for coming onto the show today. And for all of our listeners there, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. My name's Will Wheeler. This is Neurodivergent Mates. Till next time.